Have you ever noticed something swimming in your field of vision? It may look like a tiny worm or transparent blob. And whenever you try to get a closer look, it disappears, only to reappear as soon as you shift your glance. But don't go rinsing out your eyes. What you are seeing is a common phenomenon known as a flora. The scientific name for the objects is Muscae volitantes, Latin for flying flies. And true to the name, they can be somewhat annoying. But they're not actually bugs or any kind of external object at all. Rather they exist inside your eyeball. Floras may seem to be alive, since they move and change shape, but they are not alive. Floras are tiny objects that cast shadows on the retina, the light-sensitive tissue at the back of your eye. They might be bits of tissue, red blood cells, or clumps of protein. And because they're suspended within the vitreous humor, the gel-like liquid that fills inside of your eye, floras drift along with your eye movements and seem to bounce a little when your eye stops. Floras may be only barely distinguishable most of the time. They become more visible the closer they are to the retina. Just as folding your hand closer to a table with an overhead light will result in a more sharply defined shadow. And floras are particularly noticeable when you are looking at a uniform bright surface like a blank computer screen, snow, or a clear sky, where the consistency of the background makes them easier to 0.5 から入ってその後徐々に増やしていくと。0.5 音が0.5 からさあいきます。遅い。Have you ever noticed something swimming in your field of vision? Swimming. It may look like a tiny worm or transparent blob. And whenever you try to get a closer look, it disappears, only to reappear as soon as you shift your glance. よし、今日もやっていくよ。TED Talks. With overhead light will result in more sharply defined shadow, and floras are particularly noticeable when you are looking at a uniform bright surface like a blank computer screen, snow, or clear sky, where the consistency of the background makes them easier to distinguish. The brighter the light is, the more you are. Have you ever noticed something in your? It may look like a tiny worm or a transparent blob, and whenever you try to get a closer look, it disappears, only to reappear as soon as you shift your glance. But don't go rinsing out your eyes. What you are seeing is a common phenomenon known as erosion. Hollywood. While everybody's eyes experience those sorts of effects, the number and type vary greatly. In the case of floaters, they often go unnoticed as our brain learns to ignore them. However, abnormally numerous or large floaters that interfere with vision may be a sign of a more serious condition, requiring immediate medical treatment. But the majority of the time, entoptic phenomena, such as floaters and blue sky sprites, are just a gentle reminder that what we think we see depends just as much on our biology and minds as it does on the external world. よし、OK。Why left hand? Why are some people left hand? お、これ気になるね。でもここがいいな。Why are some people left-handed? これ、俺左利きだから、これいく。次はこれを学びます。まずは単純に聞いていくと。何もせずに。それが理解できるかなんだけど、できません、おそらく。全然わかんなかった。1ミリもわかんなかった、何言ってるか。よし、じゃあ今日も Why are so people left-handed? まあなぜ左利きの人がいるのかというところを見ていくと。で、今日はまずは日本語訳をしっかりとやっていくと。Then why does it happen in the first place? なぜそれはどの段階で最初の段階で起こっているのでしょうかということ。そもそもどうして、そもそもなのかな in the first place、 そもそもどうしてそれが起こってしまうのか。 in the first place、 in the first place はそういう意味なのかな。 in the first place、 in the first place 出てくるね。そもそもで出てくる。You know, older family person, chances are they had to learn to write or eat with their right hand. And in many parts of the world, it's still common practice for children to use their proper hand. Even the word for right also means correct or good, not just in English, but many other languages too. Everyone for the witness, although they you in the flow.週末の夜を買い込んで夢の糸で君をなくの 0.5 倍速。 If you know an older left-handed person, chances are they had to learn to write or eat with their right hand, and in many parts of the world, it's still common practice to force children to use their proper hand. Even the word for right also means correct or good, not just English, but many other languages too. But not just in English, but many other languages too. 日めくりカレンダーの日々を重ねない日常のページを悲しみ初苦しみ行きの人生列車なんてバイバイ涙の味に慣れてしまった。それが大人になるってことなのかな、yeah、定めという鎖に叱られて僕は光り輝き出す涙も抜く暇もないほど僕は踏み出してゆくからこんな日も することもただ待ち続ける儚い色に今日が溶けてゆく。よし。But I've been left-handed so long. And why does it happen in the first place? Today, about 1/10 of the world population are left-handed. Archaeological evidence shows that being that way for as long as 500,000 years is about 10% of human remains, showing the associated differences in arm length and bone density, and some ancient tools and artifacts showing evidence of left-hand use. And despite what many may think, handedness is not a choice. It can be predicted even before birth, based on the fetus position in the womb. So if handedness is inborn, does that mean it's genetic? Well, yes and no. Identical twins who have the same genes can have different dominant hand. In fact, this happens as often as it does with any other sibling pair. But the chances being right-born left-hand are determined by handedness of your parent in surprisingly consistent ratios. If your father was right-handed but your mother was right-handed, you have a 70% chance of being born left-handed, while two righties will have a left-handed child only 10% of the time. Handedness seems to be determined by a lot of the dice, but the odds are set by your genes. All of this implies that the reason that evolution has produced this small proportion of lefties and maintained it over the course of millennia. And while there have been several theories attempting to explain why handedness exists in the first place, or why most people are right-handed, a recent mathematical model suggests that the actual ratio reflects the balance between competitive and cooperative pressures on human evolution. The benefits of being left-handed are clearest in activities involving an opponent, like combat or competitive sports. For example, about 50% of top hitters in baseball have been left-handed. Why? Think of it as a surprise advantage. Because lefties are a minority to begin with, both right-handed and left-handed competitors will spend most of their time encountering and practicing against righties. The two face each other. The left-hander will be better prepared against the right-handed opponent, while the righty will be thrown off. This fighting hypothesis, wherein balancing population results in advantage for athletes, is an example of negative frequency-dependent selection. But according to the principle of evolution, groups that have a relative advantage tend to grow until their advantage disappears. People are only fighting competing human evolution. Natural selection would lead to more lefties being the one man made it until there were so many of them that was no longer a rare asset. So in a purely competitive world, 50% of the population would be left-handed. But human evolution has been shaped by cooperation as well as competition. And cooperative pressure pushes handedness distribution in the opposite direction. In golf, where performance doesn't depend on your opponent, only 4% of top players are left-handed, an example of the wider phenomenon of tool sharing. Just as young potential golfers can more easily find the set of right-handed clubs, many of the important instruments that have shaped society were designed for the right-handed majority, because lefties are worse at using these tools and suffer from higher action rates. They will be less successful in a purely cooperative world, eventually disappearing from the population. 何見ようかな。何がいいかな。なんかないかな、いいの。人間が話してるやつにしようかな、今回は。これか、try something new for 30 days。短くね ?3 分やん。まあ、一旦聞きます、まずは。何が言いたいんだろうな。試しにやってみよう。Give it a shot for the next 30 days。次の30日間でと。 なるほどね。なかなかいいね。ちょっと、なんか胸熱だね、これ普通に。A few years ago, I felt like I was stuck in a rut. So I decided to follow in the footsteps of great American philosopher Morgan Spurlock and try something new for 30 days. The idea is actually pretty simple. Think about something you've always wanted to add to your life and try it for the next 30 days. It turns out 30 days is just about the right amount of time to add a new habit or subtract a habit, like watching the news from your life. There are a few things I learned while doing these 30-day challenges. The first was, instead of the months flying by forgetting, the time was much more memorable. This was part of a challenge I did to take a picture every day for a month, and I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing that day. I also noticed that as I started doing more harder 30-day challenges, my self-confidence grew. I went from guest during computer to the kind guy who likes to work for fun.
Even last year, I ended up hiking up Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. I would never have been that adventurous before I started my 30-day challenges. I also figured out that if you really want something badly enough, you can do anything for 30 days.
Have you ever wanted to write a novel? Every November, tens of thousands of people try to write their own 50,000 novel from scratch in 30 days. A few years ago, I felt like I was stuck in a rut. So I decided to follow in the footsteps of the great American philosopher Morgan Spurlock and try something new for 30 days. The idea is actually pretty simple. Think about something you've always wanted to add to your life and try it for the next 30 days. It turns out 30 days is just about the right amount of time to add a new habit or subtract a habit, like watching the news from your life. There's a few things I learned while doing 30-day challenges. The first was, instead of the months flying by forgetting, the time was much more memorable. This was part of a challenge I did to take a picture every day for a month, and I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing that day. I also noticed that as I started to do more and harder 30-day challenges, my self-confidence grew. I went from desk training computer now to the kind of guy who likes to work for fun. Even last year, I ended up hiking up Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. I would never have been that adventurous before I started my 30-day challenges. I also figured out that if you really want something badly enough, you can do anything for 30 days. Have you ever wanted to write a novel? Every November, tens of thousands of people try to write their 50,000 word novel from scratch in 30 days. It turns out all you have to do is write 1,667 words a day for a month. So I did. By the way, the secret is not to go to sleep until you've written your word for the day. You may be sleep deprived, but you finish the novel. Now, is my book the next great American novel? No, I wrote it in a month. It's awful. But for the rest of my life, if I meet John Holtzman at a pet party, I don't have to say, I'm a computer scientist. No, if I want to, I can say, I'm a novelist. So here's one last thing I'd like to mention. I learned that when I make small, sustainable changes, things keep doing, they're more likely to stick. There's nothing wrong with big crazy challenges. In fact, they're a ton of fun. But they're likely to stick. When I gave up sugar for 30 days, day 31 looked like this. So here's my question to you. What are you waiting for? I guarantee you the next 30 days are going to pass whether you like it or not. So why not think about something you have always wanted to try? And give it a shot for the next 30 days. Thanks.